We bring together top leaders and experts to share their unfiltered truth about the journey to self-actualization and the path to heart-centered leadership. You'll hear raw lessons, learn ancient wisdom, and practical steps to rise to your fullest potential. Now is the time to walk into this new paradigm of leadership. Let's transcend together. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Transcendent Leadership. I am already a little nervous recording this podcast, and I want to preface this conversation with a trigger warning that what I'm about to share and what we're going to talk about may be some sensitive content to some people. And I figured that it would be of highest service to just announce that immediately before we even dive into today's content, because I'm the person who experienced what I'm going to share. And I know that many people have also experienced this, and I'm nervous talking about it. So I just want to let you know this is probably not going to be a podcast that you're going to want to listen to when you have children in the car. And this is going to be a podcast that might elicit some emotions from you. And so if this does, I invite you to lean on your support system and talk with somebody who can help you through this matter. I could certainly be one of them. I offer individual sessions as well as private work, and would be happy to support you in moving through these experiences that I'm going to share if it relates to you and it's something that's happened in your life. And so thank you for being on this journey with me, because we're going to dive into something that I've never publicly shared before. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about this so early on the relaunch of the podcast is because it was a very important and has been a very important thing in my journey, particularly the last couple of years and especially the last 6 months. It was part of the reason why I took a few months off of this podcast, as well as time off in the last couple of years, because I was navigating the emotions that are related to this. And it's part of the reason why I do what I do. And I love doing what I do, because not only have I been trained to support people through this process as a clinician, as somebody who holds a master's degree in clinical psychology and was a licensed clinical professional counselor, but also that I have experienced a lot of what I walk people through. So there's a level of attunement around the energetics and spiritual components that are related to this beyond the educational pieces that I think are fundamental in being able to have compassion and empathy for people who go through these kinds of things, as well as just awareness on the actual process outside of the textbook that can support people through this journey. And so today's title of this podcast, I'm not sure exactly what we're going to call it in the moment, but to some extent it's going to be around your biggest block to your potential. And what I'm going to say is probably going to surprise you because you're going to think it's one thing, but it's a general scope of things that really get in the way of your potential. And so before I tell you exactly what that block is, I'm going to share a story. And so the story begins that many years ago, I started having a lot of difficulty remembering my childhood. And truth be told, I really never had a very clear remembrance of what happened when I grew up. And because I dealt with a lot of substance use issues and partying when I was growing up, I always thought and assumed that it was probably partying that inhibited me from getting in touch with my memories. And I just kind of chalked it up to maybe I was a stoner, or maybe I lost a lot of brain cells from drinking too much and doing too many keg stands in college. And all of which, could have some level of truth to it, right? But I didn't really realize that what I was going to encounter later in life was going to be significantly beyond that. So growing up, like I said, didn't have access to my memories. And then as I started getting trained in psychology and in mental health and as a counselor, I started to realize that what I was actually experiencing was trauma brain, that there were coping mechanisms and protective strategies that were protecting me from accessing these memories. Our body is a very smart and intelligent thing. And so I was in some ways surprised that this is what I was starting to realize, and in some ways not surprised, because there was always kind of an inkling around what is actually there? What is that? So a few years ago, I went on a questioning, interviewing rampage where I asked everyone in my family for multiple times a year, what happened to me? I would ask, what happened to me? And my mom was like, honey, I don't know. My father was like, honey, I don't know. My sister, I don't know. Family, I don't know. Everyone kept saying, I don't know. And I would get angry because I knew on a cellular level, intuitively, that something had happened in my childhood. And many people experience that as well. Intuitively, they're like, I just know this thing happened, but I don't know exactly what happened. And so there became a point where I had just accepted that something happened in my childhood, but maybe I'd never find out. Maybe I'd never know what happened. And then I started to pray, and I started to feel like this was getting in the way of me reaching my potential. This was getting in the way of me living a happy life, because a lot of times I felt angry that I knew something happened and I didn't know what. I felt like I started to notice my inability to deeply connect with other people, and was constantly feeling paranoid that they were going to hurt me or take advantage of me. I felt that there were many times when I just couldn't feel safe, regardless of how much money I had or how many people were around me. I just always felt unsafe. And so I started taking a look at these experiences and started to just pray that, God, if I am meant to know what happened to me when I was a child, what experiences I had when I was a child, please show me. Show me in a way that is manageable. Show me in a way that is graceful. Show me in a way that I can handle it. And so I set that down and I forgot about it. And I started working with practitioners around this piece, seeing if I could access it in a graceful way. And one of the practitioners that I was working with was like, Carissa, this is going to come out when it's meant to come out. No matter how much digging I did, it was impossible to get there. I could not get there. And at the time, I was still feeling really numb. I was feeling confused, started feeling really disoriented. And as I continued to pray and kind of just let it go, at the end of last year, or no, at the middle of last year in 2020, I went on a plant medicine journey and started to work in the shamanic realms with my teacher and with the modalities that we're working with. And I started to go into states of consciousness that were allowing me to access this information. And as soon as I started to feel the subtle validation that what I had believed was true started to actually feel in my body viscerally like validation, I freaked out. I used a method called core belief work that I actually practice with people that I work with. And what happens is we go into the shamanic state, we go into a journey together, and we're able to access imprints and trauma and subconscious beliefs and programming that are in the energetic field that are contributing to a person's misalignment, disease, illness, inability to create success, sabotage, whatever. And I started doing this on myself. And I, in a moment, started to see Carissa as a little girl and that she was terrified. And as soon as I started to see and have visions of this little me and start to remember that there was something there that I was terrified of, I freaked out. And I was like, I don't actually want to know. I don't want to know. I can't handle it. I don't want to know. And then when I got out of that experience, I went home and I knew that it was going to start to come out. I knew that at this point, I had the tools, I had the resources, I had the support, and I also had the space to dive in to this trauma. And little by little over the last year, I have started to have memories. I've started to have experiences that validated what I knew to be true. And then at the end of last year, I was in connection with a man and I started to have really profound paranoia that he was going to hurt me, that he was going to like kidnap me, that something was going to happen. And so as these memories were coming out and I was in connection with somebody and it started to get really strong, and I knew that my experience of him was not of somebody who was a predator, but was a kind, gentle being, I was like, okay, I feel that something is about to come out. I could feel it at the tip of my energetic field that it was ready to be here. And so I was led to schedule a session with a shamanic teacher that I work with. And we went on a journey together. And I was shown exactly what happened to me when I was a child. And I was shown that I was molested by somebody who was in my family at the time, somebody who was married or connected to my family, not an immediate family member, but somebody who was really close to my family, who acted as a family member to us. And I was shown an experience of what happened as a little girl. I'm not going to go into the detail of exactly what the visualization was or the memory was, but I accessed a memory that was very, very, very clear, very visceral, very daunting, very confusing. And all of these emotions started to flood. I felt confused because it was with somebody who identified as a caregiver. I was angry because I was so young. I was 6 years old around the time period that this happened. I was disassociating because it was so painful for me to experience as a child. It was almost as if I was hovering over the memory and I was able to look down and see the experience. And I had doubted that it was real, even though I had this fear, very clear visceral remembrance. I was literally shaking and sweating when we were in this deep shamanic state together. And when I came out, the practitioner I was working with validated every single thing that I had experienced. She said that she saw the same exact things that I did, and she validated this experience. And so this was the first time that I had a full memory. And this was the first time that I had ever felt validated for what this experience was, because everyone thought that I was crazy, that maybe this was past life trauma, or maybe this was whatever. And in many ways, there might be layers of that, but I knew that something had happened. I knew that energetically I could feel it in my body by the things that I had experienced, the like weird health issues, the paranoia, the fear of intimacy, the fear of like not feeling safe. I knew that something was here. And as soon as I felt validated, it was equally as relieving that, wow, this happened. And I felt like, okay, I knew this happened and I know it. And then I knew that I was going to go into an experience that was going to radically change my life forever, that I was going to have to confront what this experience was and what it created and manifested in my life. And so when I realized this last year, it really caused me to go into a deep, profound, very difficult healing journey of emotions, of crying, of confusion, of being disoriented. And ironically, at the same time, I was experiencing some of the most profound career opportunities and success of my life. So, holding this duality of, I just realized and have validation that as a child, I was molested by a caregiver. And just for context, it wasn't just one time, it was multiple times that this had happened over a course of years. I was experiencing the validation and the remembering of these experiences, as well as having these moments where I'm like, wow, I'm also experiencing so much pleasure and joy and awareness around what's possible and who I am and where I'm going. And that became what I had to show up for and what I chose to show up for. And in some weird way, I must have planned it to be like this because I held that duality. And so the reason why I took time off of this podcast is because that was what I was experiencing. That was what I was navigating, was this full awareness around what happened and not knowing, how do I integrate this? How do I talk about this? How do I heal this? What is this purpose? Because what I've believed and what I've come to know over the last 8, 9 years of doing transformational work with people, it is that these experiences can be opportunities for greater awareness around our purpose, that these experiences often prepare us for what we're here to do. And typically, it is the people who go through the deepest amount of tragedy and trauma that are ultimately here for one of the greatest purposes, to help other people through that. And as I was alchemizing this energy, as I was healing this trauma, as I was releasing energy that had been stored in my field for 30 something years, or I guess it would be 20 because I'm 33, for 20 something years, I started to feel what it felt like to feel safe. I started to feel like what it felt like to really be in connection with people, to not have paranoia. But in some ways, you don't know how wound up you are. You don't know what kind of trauma is blocking you until you release it. It's similar to when you stretch. You don't know how tight you are until you are not anymore. And then you're like, wow, this is really what it feels like to be liberated. This is what it feels like to be free. This is what it feels like to be safe. And as I started experiencing that, I knew that this was going to be a really important part of what I am here to talk about and teach. And I've looked at that in every single experience that I've had throughout my life, with my substance use, with my mental health issues, with my issues with my body and food and eating and illness, and things that I've overcome naturally with food and medicine, like natural medicine and exercise and mental health support and counseling and all the tools that I've used. I'm like, wow, I'm seeing my life in such a different way. I'm seeing the intelligence and orchestration that happens when you just are walking on your journey and you're led to your own healing. That is why I got into coaching and counseling and mentorship to begin with. It was fundamentally to heal me and to get to know me on a deeper level. And it led me to so much appreciation for this work, that I knew that I had to share it, that I knew that in some ways, maybe I could support someone from ending their suffering, or maybe I could support them in navigating it more gracefully, or at least not as chronically or long term. Maybe I could help them heal it faster in a way. And that's really what led me to this place. So the reason why I wanted to share this is because in many ways, this trauma, this capital T trauma for me, was my biggest block to my potential. And capital T trauma or little t trauma, whether that be, just so you know, trauma is identified as an overwhelming experience for the body. And that's why it becomes easy to be like, oh, well, I didn't experience rape, or I didn't experience abduction, or I didn't experience this, so that's not trauma. But trauma can happen when you're on a playground and you're teased by another child. Trauma can happen when your parents are arguing about finances and you experience it. That can be trauma because it's overwhelming for the system. And in many ways, in shamanism, we talk about this as this being a soul fractal. So a part of you literally fractals off because it's too overwhelming for you to be in the body. And so this is why we a lot of times will do soul retrieval, and in a lot of different lineages and paths they do soul retrieval work where they're bringing part of the part back. I mean, there's family systems work where you're talking to different parts, there's shamanism, there's energy work where you're calling the part back so you can be a more whole embodied being. This is why I talk about wholeness, because if we're not whole and there's a part of us that's fractaled off because of trauma, then we're not able to be as happy, as magnetic, as healthy, as abundant, because we're all of our energy, all of our parts, all of our soul is not here. So this podcast is about trauma being the biggest block to your potential. And the reason why that is because part of the reason why I just referenced, you're not a whole bodied being. You might be operating from a hyper masculine energy because you're trying to prove something, because you believe that you have to do it by yourself. You might be operating from paranoia, right? The trauma for me manifested in paranoia. I couldn't trust anyone. So, in some ways, it got in the way of me doing business partnerships and collaborations because I always felt like somebody was out to get me. It got in the way of me attracting more abundance because I was feeling always chronically unsafe. My nervous system was very unregulated consistently. I lived in a state of stress. So when your nervous system isn't regulated, it becomes difficult to show up in the world in a grounded, calm way. And when you're stressed out, you can't manifest as easily, or you have to work harder. And this is why I talk about healing trauma with many leaders and them having this paradigm around you have to work hard. It's likely because many of them have experienced trauma, so they're not able to do things more easily, so they're trying to outwork their trauma. They're trying to prove themselves, or they actually fundamentally have to work harder because they're fighting against their natural state, which is magnetism and radiance and personal power. And your energy system can attract things to your life. So, in many ways, the busyness was a byproduct in my life of trauma. And so, for the last however many years I've been in this business, there were many times when I was experiencing an infinite amount of influx of money and clients, but yet I wasn't happy. I was feeling numb. I was constantly trying to keep myself busy. And I labeled it as ambition. I was like, this is just me being ambitious. Every day I wake up in the morning, I'm listening to an audio. When I'm going on a walk, I'm listening to a podcast. When I'm cleaning, I'm listening to something. When I'm working, I'm doing it really hard and for many long hours. There was no space for me to be. And it was because it was a protective strategy for me not to feel. And I really want to invite you to let that land for a moment, that busyness is a trauma response to unhealed wounds. It doesn't mean that ambition is bad. I'm a very ambitious human. I love creating. I love the work that I do. So I love, in a sense, working. I'm a generator. So I have a lot of energy to expend. It's not that ambition is wrong. But if you are constantly working, if you are constantly busy and you have a really hard time slowing down and being present with people and your life and bringing breath into your body, there is likely something that you are on a subconscious level avoiding, that you do not want to feel. And that doesn't mean that you are wrong or bad. It means that your body is really smart and that it's wanting to protect itself. But it also means that this is getting in the way of your potential, because all of these things can be manifesting in ways in your life that are causing you to suffer, that are causing life to be harder, that are getting in the way of the fullness of aliveness and love and compassion and connection to your heart and to your truth and to your purpose, that you could get more in touch with if you allowed yourself to slow down and access what you're actually afraid to access. So trauma is the biggest block because of the way that it manifests and because how hard it will cause you to want to work, because you're avoiding or because you're working against or you're trying to outwork your trauma. This is the most common thing that I am seeing with my clients right now and in the world right now, where there has been so much trauma caused to people in the last however many years that they are now only realizing that they have been in a survival state And I'm not sure if I talked about it in the last couple episodes or the one before we relaunched, but I talked about the different emotional states, the brain states. There's the survival state, there's the emotional state, and there's the executive state. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, or when you're trying to make money but you can't exceed beyond a certain cap, or you're experiencing life and you just feel numb and you're not actually feeling, and whenever anybody brings you emotions you don't know how to handle it or you get really uncomfortable, these are in some ways telltale signs of trauma. Maybe you have manifested like disease in your body or illness in your body or symptoms that are weird and keep coming back. This is often trauma. It's emotional energy that is trapped in the body. It's getting in the way of your life force energy circulating through your entire body that creates this natural flow of how your body works together in harmony. This is what causes blocks. This is what causes disease and illness. So I invite you to really think about for a moment if you've experienced any of the following symptoms that I have mentioned, whether that be chronic disease that you feel like you haven't been able to heal with Western medicine or even with Eastern medicine, that you constantly feel like you have to be busy or that you're always stressed, or that you have a hard time being really present, that you feel like you want to feel more deeply and you don't know how, that you might actually feel kind of dead inside, that you feel really numb, that you're craving and yearning for life, thinking, is this actually it? Is this really all that there is? These are symptoms of why it is. These are symptoms of trauma that can be getting in the way. And just to reiterate, the reason why these are blocks is because you might be trying to prove yourself by overcompensating for a feeling of not feeling worthy, because when you were a child your father told you that you weren't enough, or however, or maybe he you know loved your brother or your sister more and that caused trauma, or you are constantly just busy and there's unresolved emotions. So not creating space in your life and feeling like you have to constantly be doing, and oftentimes you just really know that there's something there, but you are getting in the way of you accessing it. These are the blocks to your potential. Life can actually feel a lot easier and calmer, and you can attract more and you can create more when you do this healing work. So whether it's a subconscious thing that you're not aware of and it's manifesting, or whether you're aware of it and you don't know how to deal with it, or whether you're aware of it and you're starting to deal with it but you're not exactly sure where this is going to take you and you're scared, I just want to tell you, and I wanted to share this podcast because I am an example that you can do the work. I'm an example that as you continue to heal in your life can exceedingly get better. As soon as I started to heal this trauma, I feel so much more regulated in my nervous system. I feel connected to God. I feel connected to my heart. I feel connected to my pleasure. I trust people more. I feel that life and attracting clients has been easier. I feel more creative. I just feel more alive, and I feel more love, and I feel more pleasure, and life just feels like it's happening through me and there's so much less resistance. So I stand as a testament to this is possible for you. I stand as a testament to the world is waking up to what trauma is, how we've all experienced trauma, and how to heal trauma, especially through nervous system regulation work and somatic work. It can be very profound. So if you're just getting started on this journey, I just want to invite you to ease up in your life. I don't like to use the word slow down because oftentimes that can cause a lot of resistance for people when they're like, I don't want to slow down. Life is happening fast. I want to speed up. And I had so much resistance to that as well. But just ease up. Maybe you can just slow down, or you can just ease up a little bit more in the way that you communicate. Maybe you can ease up in just the way that you walk, and maybe you walk a little bit more gracefully. Maybe you take a little bit more space and you don't listen to or consume as much information for a little bit, and just creating more space in your life, even if you don't have significant trauma to heal from, creating more space in your life where you connect to nature, where you realize we're so plugged into the matrix, and that life is meant to be so much more than just this hustle and grind and this productivity, that it's meant to be lived and meant to be enjoyed, and there's meant to be love that we're here to experience. So just ease up. And the second thing is to just get curious about some of the things that you've been experiencing, whether that be stress or numbness or confusion or feeling disoriented or disease or illness, get curious about what is the root of these issues, because these are all symptoms of a deeper challenge in your life. So get really curious about where this is coming from. And maybe this is where you work with somebody to support you in this. I have helped a handful of people really move through significant childhood trauma, especially related to sexual trauma. And many of my clients, if not all of them, we've healed through trauma just in general. And so get really curious and work with somebody. And the third thing is to really work on your emotional intelligence. If you have a hard time connecting with people who are emotional, or you're like, oh, they're really feminine and all they want to talk about is their emotions, recognize there might be a part of you within you that has a difficult time being with other people's emotions because you have a hard time being with your own. And this, goes to the saying that we can only take people as deep as we're willing to go. So if you're a leader, if you're a practitioner, a trainer, a mentor, a coach of some sort, your trauma can be getting in the way not only of your highest potential, your manifesting abilities, your love, your pleasure, your joy, your abundance, but it also can be getting in the way of your potential in supporting your clients and being of greater service and helping them get results as well. So increasing your emotional intelligence, and we'll talk about that more in the coming episodes around actual practices and techniques that you can do to get more in touch with your emotions, to heal yourself and to liberate them so that you can access these states of consciousness, so that you can liberate your energy and that you can actually realize and step into your greatness and your leadership potential and your power. So thank you for being on this journey with me and listening to this podcast and sharing it with people that might benefit. I didn't know how I was going to get through it because there's still a lot of tenderness behind it, but I've done a lot of healing work to be able to get to this point, and the healing never ends. And I'm grateful for it because I love it. And I know that there are layers and there are spirals on this journey that we continue to walk. And so I'm walking on this journey here with you. And my prayer and my intention is that you really sit with this episode and you really sit with what I'm saying here and see if there is a resonance, see if there's something within you that is like you're feeling some type of way about this conversation, and allow yourself to dig deeper and can get connected with people who can support you, because we truly can live a limitless life when we heal our trauma and we access our greatest truth. So much love to you today and for the coming days as maybe you start to sort through some of these things. And I hope and I pray that I can be of service to you, whether in this moment or moving forward. So thank you for listening and be here. And I will chat with you next week. Bye-bye.